Attention, you're listening to The Todd Huff Show, America's home for conservative, not bitter talk and education. Be advised, the content of this program has been documented to prevent and even cure liberalism, and listening may cause you to lean to the right. And now, coming to you from the Full Suite Wealth Studios, here's your conservative but not bitter host, Todd Huff.
Where is the outrage, my friends? Where is the screaming and crying and overly dramatic responses out there from people who told me that redistricting in a midterm election year halfway through the decade was the most egregious, offensive thing known to man. I was told this by both Republicans and Democrats. Democrats, of course, screaming from the rooftops, hissing at me when I made a speech at the State House here back in December in support of Republicans redistricting. And, of course, Republicans thinking they somehow found some moral high ground by allowing the people who are destroying this country, ruining families, who are, presenting ideas and promoting policies that are downright dangerous, my friends, absolutely harmful to people, things like the trans agenda and everything else. Where are the people? I'm waiting for them to tell me what Virginia did yesterday was completely inexcusable, and it is worth mourning over, taking days off of work and crying and lamenting this turn of events. I want to talk about this, my friends. I want to talk about the redistricting that happened in Virginia, the state of Virginia. And I want to go through and show how consistent I actually am and how inconsistent these pretenders and these folks who want to be seen as virtue signaling to people in our country. I want to compare and contrast this with what happened here in my state of Indiana. I told you more of this was coming when we talked about this at the end of last year and earlier this year, and now it's here. The chickens, as Jeremiah Wright would say, Obama's pastor. America's chickens have come home to roost, I guess. So anyway, that's where we're headed today, my friends. Let's talk about something here off the top that's important. What we're going to talk about is important, but this is also important. That's your money. You worked hard for it. But is your money working hard for you in the form of your investments? And is it working hard for what you believe in? Listen, it is easy to say that we believe in a particular principle or idea or whatever. But one of the beautiful things about God creating a material, physical universe for us to live in is that we can prove what we believe by what we do. And at 4-8 Financial, they specialize in what they call biblically responsible investing. That means they screen out companies that don't align with your faith and your values. And they help, 4-8 Financial helps create a plan that helps fit your goals and purpose, and also keeps you from investing in companies that are antithetical, the opposite of your faith and values. And the starting point is to do a quick assessment just to see to what degree your current investments align with your beliefs and values. And it's easy to do. You'll head on over to 48financial.com/Todd. Do that now, 48financial.com/Todd. Take the quick and easy assessment. And then 4-8 Financial will give you the results. 4-8 Financial helping you align your money with your mission. Okay. So let's go a little bit back in time. And let me say this. If you want to hear what I was saying about redistricting efforts in the state of Indiana, you can go back to November December. Go on the website, look in the podcast archive. November, December, you will see that is when we were talking about this. Early December, I also went to the State House and spoke at a Turning Point Action event, and along with Governor Braun and Lieutenant Governor Micah Beckwith, other representatives who were fighting for redistricting, the actual strong Republican leaders understood, the folks who understood what we're up against, what we're fighting against. They actually stood in up there on stage as well and spoke and tried to rally the troops. There were, of course, some notable absences, including my own state senator here, Rod Bray. Didn't show up to work that day, wouldn't respond to me by email. I showed up in person. I called and left messages. Nothing. Literally nothing. They pretended like they didn't get my messages until months later. It's just, it's pure sophistry and nonsense. I thought about using carrier pigeons and smoke signals as well. But of course the fix was in. Rod Bray didn't want this to even be on the agenda, and he did everything in his power, I believe, to stop this from happening. There's of course even reports that he was working with the leader of the Maryland Senate as sort of a compromise here. You don't redistrict in Maryland, we won't redistrict here in Indiana. Bottom line is there were, what was it? I think the final vote was, I think there were around 20 who voted to redistrict here in Indiana, roughly that. Half of Republicans didn't. And now this, by the way, if you're in Indiana, I know this program is heard all around the country. I'm going to talk a little bit about Indiana, but I'm talking primarily about Virginia, because that changes the calculus on what's going to happen as it pertains to congressional districts and who potentially will control the House of Representatives in the next Congress, which we vote on here in the general election in November. But here in my state of Indiana, you can vote now. You can early vote, and you can also, this is the primary, and you can vote these knuckleheads. I say it with love and respect. These folks out who did not support redistricting. Trump has come out. Lieutenant Governor Micah Beckwith has come out. Turning Point Action has come out. And they've all endorsed the opposition. People to be primaried. These state Senate races where there's someone on the ballot who voted against redistricting. Turning Point, Trump, Micah Beckwith. They've all said we're endorsing the challenger, basically, to primary these people. And I would like to see as many of these people primaried as possible. Look, some of them may be really good people, maybe most of them, maybe all of them for that matter. This is not about that. This is understanding what's at stake. This is understanding the game. This is understanding your role as a legislator. Your job is to, well, when you have the votes, to use the political power at your fingertips. That is actually a constitutional use of power. See, power, my friends, it's wild to me. Power that's not prescribed by the Constitution is bad. Power that is assigned to, whether it's the executive branch, the legislative branch, the judicial branch, power being exercised within the confines of the Constitution is just politics. It's the way that it's designed to work. You have to have some power somewhere in our system of government, or nothing could ever get done. Nothing could ever get done at all. And so the founders knew this, and they said, look, we don't necessarily want the exercise of power to be easy. We certainly don't want it to be concentrated in one particular branch or a small group of people or in an individual's hands. But what we do want is we want to be able to say that this is the responsibility. These things are the responsibility of this particular branch. And determining congressional districts is absolutely, unequivocally a constitutional responsibility of the state legislatures. And our state legislature here in Indiana dropped the ball bigly last, November? Well, I guess it was December December or January, I guess, is when they finally had the vote, when they voted against this. And I think there should be political consequences to pay for those who didn't. That's what I think. You can think the opposite. You can think the people that voted for it should have to pay. That's politically, that's just life. And I think you're wrong. Actually, I know you're wrong, but that's okay. We can have these disagreements. So I'm remarkably consistent on this. What you're not going to hear me come on here to do that today is what other conservatives are out there doing. They're decrying the fact that Virginia did this. Now, let me preface what I just said by adding this. There are rules that each state has. We have 50 nifty United States, or if you prefer Obama's count, there are 57 states. But whatever your count, there are states that have they're autonomous. They're autonomous. We have 50 states that have come together. It's even in the name of our country, the United States of America. States came together and united to form a federal government with certain powers that have been allocated to the various branches, the three branches of our government. And there's a loose agreement, right? An agreement. I say a loose agreement. It's a firm agreement in what the government should do. But there's a lot of power that's reserved for the state. So you can manage your state as you see fit. And that's the beauty of this. You know, when I was in school studying political science, we talked about these things. I remember taking a state and local government course, and we talked about something called the laboratory of the states, where states would be able to implement their own ideas and policies. And the idea is that other states would be watching what each other did or does, and they could replicate the things that seem to do well. They could get rid of the things and learn from the mistakes of others when things didn't go so well. And that was the idea. And so you don't want mandatory federal control of most things because, well, multiple reasons, but one of them is the laboratories of the states. The other is that when you have state and local control, people's voices are actually more powerful. Plus, there's different interests and needs and wants. We're all human beings, but there's different priorities in different parts of the country, different states. So each state is going to be different. We have this system that's federalism, which reserves to the states the rights not enumerated in the Constitution and given to the federal government. And so states control how so the Constitution says state legislatures are responsible for drawing congressional districts, their congressional maps. Then each state gets that responsibility, and the Congress, the legislature, may have done any number of things in handling this. For example, in my state, it's pretty much, there weren't many rules. It's simply the state legislature can do this. And it says it must do it every 10 years, but it does, because that's because of the census. Every 10 years, the districts have to be at least looked at based upon the population changes and so forth. So you have to do it every 10 years, but it doesn't mean you can't do it at other times. Listen, Indiana did exactly what they should do, except they came up short because of wimpy Republicans, or dare I say Republicans who don't grasp what we're up against, the reality of politics. They didn't maybe know these things. They may have thought it was cheating. I don't know. They should have been listening to this program, undoubtedly. But my friends, each state has its own prerogative. Some states do the opposite. Some states, the legislature gets together and says, look, we want this to be unbiased and nonpartisan, so we're going to appoint a commission to be involved in drawing our districts and so forth. Silly as I think that is, fine, do your commission. It's amazing to me how people who are, the average voter out there often is hoodwinked into this stuff. Oh, it's a commission. They're politically neutral. Tell me someone who's politically neutral today. I'm not saying someone can't be fair, objectively fair, or as close to that as humanly possible. But tell me someone who's truly neutral in this political environment. Everything is political today. These commissions, it doesn't do anything. It just passes the buck to another group of people that aren't directly elected. Regardless, states can do this. Some states, and this gets to Virginia, some states have a constitutional amendment talking about how they are going to handle the redistricting process, because you have to redistrict every 10 years. And that is because of a couple of things. It's because the seats in Congress, the congressional districts, are allocated to states proportionally based upon their population. And so that's why you have Indiana having 9 congressional districts, California having, what do they have now, 54 or some such thing, and everybody else in between. Wyoming having only one congressional district. I think they may be the only state, I could be wrong on this, that has more senators than representatives. Anyway, so this is just the way that it works, and states can do what they please. But in Virginia had a constitutional amendment that basically prevents them from redistricting right now. I'm giving you the simplified version. By the way, if you want more of the details that I just don't have time to get into on this program today, the best way to do that, I've shared this with you before, is to join the Inner Circle. It is free, but you'll get the email with the background links. You'll get the email that summarizes some things, gives additional articles and insight from yours truly here behind the microphone. And, of course, the links to the articles where you can do your research yourself. You can forward these things on to other people. It's kind of the, I'm going to say physical, but the digitally physical version of this program that lets you dive deeper into that. If you want to get that, again, it's free. Just text the word truth, 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 to 317-785-1030. But anyway, so Virginia's got the constitutional amendment. So the only way that they could change this is by amending or changing the constitutional amendment. So that's what they did. And yesterday was the day that they had the vote on the referendum. By the way, a referendum is when there's a direct vote by the citizens on a proposed law or a constitutional amendment or some public question. And if something goes to referendum, the result becomes law if approved. For example, you might find that there is a referendum that your school district is trying to get passed, where they are able to get some additional monies to maybe build a building or whatever. If they're in financial difficulties, they can just have a referendum for operating expenses. But that goes directly to the citizens. You vote on this at the ballot box, which, by the way, I just want to mention this. Let me read to you the verbiage on the, this is actually how this was written on the Virginia ballot. This is unbelievable to me. So tell me if this seems like a neutral way of presenting this to the constituents for a referendum. Here it is. The referendum is as follows. Again, this was approved. The people voted in favor of this. But here's what it said. Should the Constitution of Virginia be amended to allow the General Assembly to temporarily adopt new congressional districts to restore fairness in the upcoming elections while ensuring Virginia's standard redistricting process resumes for all future redistricting after the 2030 census? So it literally says in there, do you want to basically vote for something that is designed to restore fairness in the upcoming elections? You have to be kidding me. Whose definition of fairness here? What is going on? What does this have to, what does that have to do with anything? This is political war that we're in, my friends. This isn't about restoring fairness. That's about narratives. How this got onto a ballot like this is mind-boggling to me. And I'm not an attorney, and nor do I play one on this program, but I have to think that in a sane world, there are massive problems with this referendum as phrased on the ballot. And there's actually other problems for this as well, which we'll get to here in due course. So the present law is this. Virginia's 11 congressional districts are drawn once every 10 years by the Virginia Redistricting Commission, a legislative body made up of 8 legislators and 8 citizens with an equal number of Republicans and Democrats. Virginia's congressional districts were last redrawn in 2021 and will next be redrawn in 2031. So this is how this was explained in the pamphlets or the official explanation on the state's website or whatever. The proposed law, which again passed, says this. The proposed amendment this is a summary, would give the General Assembly the authority to redraw one or more of Virginia's congressional districts before 2031 in limited circumstances. In the event that another state redraws its own congressional districts before 2031 without being ordered by a court to do so, the General Assembly would then be able to redraw Virginia's congressional districts. The General Assembly's power to do so would continue until October 31st of 2030, and the Virginia Redistricting Commission would reassume the responsibility of drawing their congressional districts in 2031. The proposed district map had been approved by the General Assembly and would take effect only if the constitutional amendment is approved by the voters. So anyway, that's kind of a synopsis of what they were doing. I read you the ballot initiative or the referendum itself, which is wild that makes its way onto the actual ballot. Certainly not an objective way of looking at that, but that's where we are. I've got to pause and take a break here really quickly, my friends. If you're dealing with discomfort or you're just tired of living off prescriptions and managing the side effects, you're not alone. A lot of folks are looking for something natural they can trust. That's why I want you to check out Christopher's Organic Botanicals. They're a family-run, natural kratom company rooted in truth, tradition, and transparency. They partner directly with farmers in Indonesia. They lab test everything before it ever reaches your hands. No hype, no synthetics, no funny business, just the real deal done right. So, after you do your research, and if you think this is something you want to try, you can start with their Kratom Starter Pack. Use coupon code Todd Huff. Make sure you include my last name there, Todd Huff. That's all one word, though. Save 10% if you use that coupon code on your first purchase. Christopher's Organic Botanicals.com. Truth, tradition, transparency. Time out for me, my friends. Back in just a minute. Welcome back, my friends. So, to summarize what we've covered so far, the state of Virginia, Commonwealth of Virginia, regardless, they passed a constitutional amendment via referendum last night that allows them, as I said last segment, to redraw their districts. They're currently, as of right now, the state of Virginia is 6 Democrat, 5 Republican. They have 11 districts. It is projected, again, this comes down to votes. And when you, as I said here, again, remarkable consistency you'll find on this program. You're not going to hear me say Virginia can't do this. Now, I am going to hold out as a caveat, the rules that they have and whether or not they violated those rules, which a court may be speaking out on here pretty soon. But Virginia can do what they want, the legislature can, within the rules that they've set for themselves. That's basically how it works, just like Indiana could have and Indiana should have. Indiana's path to redistricting was much easier than Virginia's. We didn't need to change the Constitution, go to referendum. All we had to do was have a majority of senators actually, have the backbone to vote this thing through. And they didn't. They were guilted in. They were shamed in. They fell prey to the narrative and the silly argument presented by the left, which, by the way, I haven't heard anything about. I haven't heard any of the crying and wailing here that Virginia is about to do this. As I said off the top, I'm consistent in what I'm saying about this. For those who thought it was atrocious for Indiana to do this, I had better hear you. I'd better hear you respond. Respond to me. You can text me. The number I get, 317-785-1030. Tell me how distraught you are today. Or you can email todd@toddhuffshow.com. Or you can go to social media and put it out. I haven't seen these things like I saw in Indiana. I didn't see people talking about how disappointed they were. It's remarkable how that works. It's remarkable how that works, my friends. But they've passed this referendum. And again, I've compared and contrasted it with Indiana. I thought Indiana should have redistricted. I've gone through this. I'm not going to go through it again because I spent a lot of time talking about this, and I just don't want to do that right at the moment because there's lots to get to here with Virginia. But suffice it to say, my argument is that it's the prerogative of the state legislatures, notwithstanding the particular rules that a state has set in forth by their legislature, determining how districts will be drawn, when they can be redrawn, and all that sort of thing. It's remarkable to me, the people on the left, the media, who say, well, at least Virginia wants to send it to the people to a vote. Indiana has had its senators, Congress, and the state House members, the House and the Senate vote on this. Well, that was the rules. Those were the rules in Indiana. We didn't have a constitutional amendment that required changing and the process for updating a constitutional amendment. We didn't have that. So it's just preposterous the way that these people think. It's an inch deep and a mile wide. The level of commentary out there, and how these people think that they know what's going on when they really don't. And the way that this has been framed as responding to Republican efforts, people saying Republicans started this, Trump started this. No, that's just simply not true. Trump may have started the latest round of this, but districting, drawing district lines, that's something that happens every year every 10 years since the founding of this nation. And so I talked about this before until I was blue in the face. What constitutes a fair district? What makes it right, say in my state, for Republicans to say we should have a majority, the ability to win 7 seats, and you should have an advantage in 2 of those seats? Why? Why does that make any sense? What's the shape of a congressional district? Should they be squares? Can't be squares because congressional districts have to have approximately the same number of people. And if you draw squares across the state of Indiana that are of equal size, you're not going to have equal representation. So you can't do that. So how do you decide this? Should you stick with counties? Should you stay with cities? What are we trying to do? Are we trying to say that people that live in rural communities across a larger swath of a state have more in common than people that live in a city, a small town? When does a small town become a city? When does suburbia become urbia? All these questions. Tell me where are the clear lines on this? There's not any. And that's the bottom line. This comes down to political will. Yes, I understand gerrymandering. And gerrymandering, by the way, is not what Indiana did. Gerrymandering is when districts are drawn into really absurd shapes to put groups of people together that are inclined to vote one way or the other. Gerrymandering isn't illegal. Well, the Supreme Court might weigh in from time to time based upon things that are being challenged right now by in the courts. So all this stuff is we don't know where this is going to all end up. But I do know this. Gerrymandering came in the 1810, 1812, I believe. There was a governor in the state of Massachusetts. His last name was Gerry, Gerry. And one of the districts, when he was governor, was drawn in Massachusetts to reflect something that was roughly the shape of a salamander. And so people started using the phrase Gerry to refer to his time in office as governor, which is when this happened. And then salamander. They combined those, and it was meant to say drawing odd shapes. And if you look, the states that are gerrymandered, I challenge you to do this. I'm not going to say that there's not any gerrymandered Republican district or whatever, or in a Republican state, but it is largely in blue states. And no, this proportional representation thing doesn't make sense either. I've shared all this. It's not the way races work. You can't say 40% of the states Republican, therefore 40% of the seats in Congress have to be Republican. That's just not the way that works. It's also an oversimplified way of looking at things. I mean, races come down to candidates. Do you think the founders really had in mind that we would only have two political parties? I mean, this whole thing, and I understand that George Washington was really against political parties, one of the reasons I admire him so much, but it's just, none of it makes sense. We're just, the starting point is that what we had was what we should have had. And my question is why? Why were those so much better than what we're doing now? This is a political fight, and it must be fought out in the political process. Democrats are prepared to have the fight. Republicans are not. That's the lesson here. Democrats will fight tooth and nail. Republicans will not even fight, not even on the surface, my friends. Republicans are wimps. Democrats are shrewd, and they're willing to do whatever it takes. And then, of course, they've got their friends in the media who reframe this and make it sound like Virginia had no option here. They had to do it because other states had done it. But see, the problem is blue states had pretty much maximized their congressional districts. And then when Republican states started doing the same, they got upset and they said, let's have a truce. Let's have no more redistricting, right? That's what happened. And by the way, Trump's out there doing this publicly. Usually these conversations are had behind closed doors where there's a layer of plausible deniability and people don't see how the metaphorical sausage gets made and all that sort of stuff. But Trump had these conversations in the open. He said, yeah, I called Governor Abbott of Texas and told him we need to try to redistrict to get more votes. The future of the House of Representatives next term, this midterm election may hinge on how these seats are potentially changed. Republicans in Indiana dropped the ball massively. Democrats in Virginia, they actually did, listen, politically what they should have done. The problem is they may have done some things that are inconsistent with the law. And I want to talk about that. In fact, Ken Cuccinelli has a tweet out, a post on X, I guess is what I'm supposed to say now. And I'm going to talk about this. This is, by the way, in the stack of stuff that you'll find in the inner circle. If you want to get that, just text truth to 317-785-1030 and you'll get that for free every day. But I'm going to reference it here. You can look it up on X as well. That's what we're going to talk about next, because this is not over yet. The vote has been had, but there are 4 reasons that this potential vote may be struck down by the court. And that's what we'll get to next, my friends. But maybe you've reached that stage where managing your money feels more like juggling than it feels like you're just dealing with numbers and math. You got things like tax planning, estate work, investment choices, and a whole lot more. If that's you, that's when Family Office Services can really make a difference. Full Suite Wealth brings all those pieces together into one cohesive strategy. Their Family Office Services give you access to a coordinated team with advanced option strategies, private equity, private credit, legal expertise, all those things under one roof. It's about simplifying your financial life and planning for the future so that you can make sure your legacy stays strong for generations to come. If you're ready for the next level of support, visit fullsuitewealth.com. Again, that's fullsuitewealth.com. Build your legacy, secure your future. Time out for me. Back in just a minute. Welcome back, my friends. Yes, I know there are developments in Iran. In fact, I just saw a headline here. Iranian forces say they have seized 2 cargo ships, according to state media. We'll talk about these things undoubtedly in the days to come. I can't do that at the moment, however. So, I will tell you that these are occasionally in the inner circle, we often have additional content, things that we don't have time to get to. Sometimes it's other issues, other topics besides what we've talked about on the program. And again, to get that, just text truth. It's free. Text the word truth to 317-785-1030. But before the break, I told you, Ken Cuccinelli posted this tweet. I'm going to read this to you. He posted this last night, April 21st, 9:31 p.m. He says this: the yes vote has won Virginia's redistricting referendum, but the legal fight is just beginning. 4 Virginia constitutional challenges are now teed up. 3 challenges to the amendment process itself. Number 1, listen carefully here. First passage was invalid. The amendment was taken up during a special session convened in 2024 for budget purposes. The General Assembly's own call to the governor under Article 4, Section 6, and Article 5, Section 5, and its governing resolution, HJR 6001, limited the session's scope, expanding it to include a constitutional amendment on redistricting required a 2/3 vote that never occurred. A Tazewell, that's the name of a county, judge found this action void, basically. So they didn't follow the rules, potentially. That's the allegation here. That's just one of the ways. There's 3 more problems with this. So they had a special session in 2024 for budget purposes. It was supposed to be a limited session just dealing with the budget, dealing with a constitutional amendment on redistricting required a 2/3 vote, and that vote never occurred. That's a big problem legally. Number 2 here, Ken Cuccinelli says Article 12, Section 1 requires that after first passage, a proposed amendment be, quote, referred to the General Assembly at its first regular session held after the next general election of members of the House of Delegates, end quote. An election must intervene between first and second passage. Here, first passage occurred during an election cycle, not before an intervening one. So that's again, legalese and all that. Basically what it means is the process for passing an amendment in Virginia says you vote on it. It's called the first passage. You vote on it with, say, a particular, a Congress, right? And then so they vote on it with that particular Congress. Then there is an election, because you could say, hey, I don't like how my representative voted on that amendment. I want to get someone else in there. Or I like how they voted, whatever. And so then once the new Congress is in, there's an election, then they vote on the second passage. That's not what happened here, because the election was already underway because of early voting. So it didn't pass on its own in its own time, and then an election happened. The election was happening as this was going on, and that's not, according to the interpretation of the amendment or the amendment process, that's not how that's supposed to happen. Third point that Cuccinelli writes here, Article 7, Section 1 requires the amendment be submitted to voters not sooner than 90 days after final passage by the General Assembly. The timeline for second passage to the April 21st vote did not satisfy this requirement. So in other words, they say, you have your first vote, your first passage on the amendment, then you have an election, then you have your second vote on the amendment. If it passes, you have to wait at least 90 days before it's submitted to voters in the form of a referendum. So now there's 3 problems with this. And these are, again, as I understand it, these are the facts. These are the facts. And this may cause all of this to unwind. Again, it's the state's responsibility to draw their districts, but you got to follow your own rules. That shouldn't be that complicated. Anyway, the last point that he makes here, this is a challenge to the actual proposed maps, says this. Article 2, Section 6 requires that every electoral district shall be composed of contiguous and compact territory. The proposed congressional maps violate this contiguity. Is that how I say that? Requirement rather badly. That's what Ken Cuccinelli claims anyway. I'm going to pull up a map. I've looked at it. Bear with me. But again, it's different than what it is today, obviously, and I would say it looks it definitely, if you want to say something's gerrymandered, I mean I'm looking at it. There's a lot of districts. I've talked about this before now that I'm seeing this, but there's a lot of districts that get real thin as you get to the Washington, D.C. area where all the liberals are, so they all get a slice of that. But anyway, I've got to run. I'm out of time. Thanks for listening, SDG.